It seems that everything that makes this science fiction has been pushed to the side. Nathan noticed something surprising recently as he was analyzing our scenes and our subplots. What was it that prompted you to go into this analysis?
Right, so I was looking at the scenes that we have specifically in part 2 of the book, and then also looking at all of the subplots that we have for our whole story and trying to make connections of which scenes deal with which subplots. And I was doing that to try to flesh out the plot level of our story a little bit more, make sure I knew where all the connections were, which subplots aren't getting as much attention in scenes as they deserve, which scenes are relating to specific things, which scenes don't really relate to anything right now, and figuring out what connections need to be made so we have a better story that we're working with.
And part of the reason that we wanted to go through that process was to go through something that I've learned about recently that is a marketability analysis, where you send your story in and they're not necessarily doing the line level editing or even a development level editing, but just letting you know, do we even think there is a market for the story that you're creating? And so rather than waiting until we wrote out all of the manuscript for every single scene, we wanted to at least make sure that we knew what the scenes were going to be and give a summary and see if that would be enough to get a less expensive marketability analysis. Are we even headed in the right direction with this story that we're trying to write? And as you went through this analysis, what was it that you discovered?
So I realized that a lot of the subplots that I was linking to scenes were not the science fiction-y subplots. It wasn't the time travel. It wasn't the genetic modification. It wasn't the big disasters and all these organizations and what they're doing. It was more the personal relationships between our characters that were showing up a lot in those links between scenes. This GMH and another GMH, this person and a scientist, this person and their parent. Those were the relationship, the subplots that I kept linking to scenes were the relationships rather than the science fiction stuff.
And that's because the scenes that we had defined, the placeholders that we had made, were all the result of our thinking about the relationships. And it seems that everything that makes this science fiction has been pushed to the side, and that's been missing then.
Right. So it almost seems like this is becoming less of a science fiction book and more of a relationship family dynamic book. But I think it can be both. And we can be excellent in both areas if we put the effort in. And I think of a story like the movie Interstellar, which is a very good science fiction movie, but also has some very thought-provoking things about relationships between the characters. I think that's a good example of a story that does both the science fiction and the relationship parts excellently.
That ability to do both reminds me of a word that I learned over the last couple of weeks, and that is the word upmarket. It's about literary upmarket is when you have a genre fiction. At least this is my understanding based on brief research that I've done. It's when you have genre fiction, but the literary quality is elevated, where it's not just about in our case, the science fiction level plot. It's not just the genre story. It is also very deeply defined characters, relationships, all of that. And I learned that word because just like I've been exploring different places to get a marketability analysis, looking what is the stage, what are the stages that lead to successful publishing, and one of those stages is querying for not an editor, querying for an agent. So part of what I did over the last couple of weeks was just to experiment. If we were ready, we're not ready to go query an agent, but if we were, what would that experience be like? How likely is it that we'll be able to find somebody who would be interested? and I ran across I can't even remember what it's called, American something something of literary agents. I'll put a link to the place in the description here. But they had just an alphabetical list of their agents and the areas that they focus on, and I was able to just go through, scan through their list to find somebody who would accept a debut novel, which this would be a debut novel for us. They are interested in science fiction, interested in, this might be young adult, I'm not sure, young adult, new adult, and we're open to submissions. I got through the A's, didn't find anybody who meet that criteria. Got partway through the B's, and I ran across one particular agent that I'm not going to give the name just because I don't want to set any expectations, but in the description of what she is looking for, what she's particularly interested in is people who have a history or an expertise in, parenting, business, and faith were three of the areas that she concentrated on. She represents literary upmarket and genre bending works, and that's where I discovered the word upmarket. And genre bending is, yes, it is the genre, but it subverts some of the tropes, and that is exactly what we want to approach. And this is, she's drawn to novels with well-realized characters, fast-paced plots, and there's so many subplots in what we're building that to get it to fit in the space, it's going to have to be fast-paced. And distinctive voices, especially those that explore family dynamics, parent-child relationships is one of our key themes, and address contemporary issues in engaging ways. And some of the other themes that we're exploring are very much about contemporary issues. I ran across that, just got to the B's, and that was enough to tell me, okay, we have a pretty good chance that we'll be able to find somebody who will at least be willing to have a conversation with us and not just delete our query letter out of hand. So that was just an interesting part that I went through this week. So was there anything else that we had to cover here? Or are we ready to the
I think that was the bulk of it. Yeah.
All right. Well, the question for you then this week is, Nathan had mentioned Interstellar as a good story. What's another science fiction story that you can think of that also shows strong relationship growth? Let us know that in the comments, and we will see you in a couple weeks.